Welcome to the digestive system. In this particular lesson, we're going to cover the whole of the digestive system from the moment you chew food to how it gets broken down, what enzymes support the breakdown of those foods, and how the body disposes of it. So what you can see here is the human digestive system, and you can see some of the main organs that are involved in the whole process, from chewing the food to it traveling down the esophagus, to the roles that maybe the liver, the pancreas are going to play, as well as your small intestines, your large intestines, and the rectum. So digestion occurs through a mechanical process, and that particular process is known as mastication, which is the process of chewing food and breaking it down. The process is then broken down and we consume that food, at which point nutrients are taken out of the food, they're delivered around the body to fulfill the roles that they need to play. And pretty much the food that we consume is going to be a makeup of your protein, your fats, your carbohydrates, as well as your vitamins and your minerals. But it's also important to know that we need to make sure we are consuming enough water, which is going to help absorb the nutrients and aid in the digestion. So, starting at the mouth, we mentioned that term mastication, which generally speaking takes 30 to 60 seconds, depending on what you're chewing, to break down the food that we are eating. That food is then going to get moistened with saliva and swallowed. But one thing to note, the process of breaking down carbohydrates actually starts in the saliva on the tongue. So it's one of the only nutrients that starts to break down before we've even swallowed it. And it does that via an enzyme called amylase. So amylase is important for breaking down carbs, and it's important to note that, as that has come up in previous exam papers in the past. There's also no chemical breakdown of fat or protein in the mouth. That will occur at a later stage of digestion. So for those particular nutrients, we just chew them, break them down as much as we can and swallow them, but they won't actually start to break down until they get to a later stage. But carbohydrates will start breaking down in the mouth with that amylase as the enzyme that assists. Then you've got the pharynx. So the pharynx is the throat. And this part of the digestive system is part of your respiratory system and your digestive system. So it's also known as the windpipe, but it's also known as a food pipe. And it distinguishes between the two. So for somebody who has, say, swallowed food and they start choking, what has happened is that has basically traveled to the windpipe. We have something called the epiglottis, which is a valve. So the way the valve works is if you take a deep breath in, that valve is going to open up the entrance to the windpipe to allow the air to go down. When we're consuming food and we swallow, that valve will stay down. So it notices the difference between breathing in and swallowing. What can happen sometimes, if you're chewing food but you take a breath, that valve will open up to the lungs and it's going to send food in there, which is going to get lodged, which is going to cause you to choke, which is why the pharynx is actually part of both the respiratory and also the digestive system. You've then got the esophagus. So the esophagus is the main pipe that leads down to the stomach. And the way food actually gets pushed down the esophagus is via a process called peristalsis, which just means contraction in a wave-like motion. So what that means is one part of the pipe is going to squeeze to push food down, then the next part will squeeze, the next part, and the next part. Almost try and picture a Mexican wave. So people put their hands up, and it goes round in a wave-like motion. The same thing happens in our bodies, is that each section will contract like a wave to force that food down into the stomach. Once it's reached the stomach now, we have a different enzyme that is going to get released, and that is called pepsin. So pepsin is what is going to help now break down the protein into smaller amino acids. So it's important to know amylase is responsible for breaking down carbohydrates, whilst pepsin is now responsible for breaking down protein into amino acids. The other thing the stomach is going to do is it's going to release hydrochloric acid. What that hydrochloric acid does is helps to kill any bacteria in the food that may cause a problem to the body if it reaches the intestines and gets absorbed into the bloodstream. So if there's any kind of viruses, bacteria, things like that on your food, it should kill the majority of this with that hydrochloric acid before it reaches the next stage. It's important to note as well, one thing that they may try to catch you out with in an exam is the time it takes for the digestive system to go through its process. So they may word the question as how long does the whole digestive process take? Or they may put how long does digestion take in the stomach? The process in the stomach takes around 5 hours, but the whole digestive process can be anywhere from kind of 18 to 36 hours. So it's just important to know the difference between the two. Once it's kind of gone through the stomach, the hydrochloric acid has killed off any bacteria. The food is then going to travel to the small intestine. It's important to note here that this is where the majority of nutrients are absorbed from your food. So approximately 80% will get absorbed at this stage. What the purpose of this is to break down nutrients into their usable components. So we're extracting your vitamins, your minerals, your proteins, your carbs, your fats, all those key nutrients that the body is going to need for recovery, repair, and normal daily function will get taken out at this stage. And the way it takes it out is through something called villi or microvilli. And the way I want you to picture this is they're like little hands that are going to go around grabbing those nutrients and pulling them from the intestine, where it will deliver them into the bloodstream to send around the body. So think of it like a conveyor belt in a factory. You've got things going down the conveyor belt, and there's normally loads of workers that are picking things out or putting things in. It's exactly the same as that. So as it kind of passes through the small intestine, these little villi are like hands pulling out all of the nutrients that the body needs. And it's also going to absorb water at this stage as well. So again, it's key to make sure that we are staying hydrated to assist with that digestion. Once it's gone through the small intestine, which as it states above is approximately 7 meters in length, it's going to move over to the large intestine, which is approximately 1.5 meters now. This is pretty much the final stage of digestion. So what's going to happen here is it's going to take out any remaining nutrients, vitamins, minerals, things like that may have been missed in the small intestine. But it also plays an important role, which is to reabsorb the remaining water from any undigested food, which is why it's key that we make sure we are consuming loads of fiber in our diet. If you have a diet that is low in fiber and you've got nothing to absorb all of that liquid, it's going to come out as liquid when you go to the toilet, which is why it's so important that we're making sure we consume enough fiber to help solidify, absorb the water, to make the passage much smoother and more comfortable when you go to the toilet. The undigested food and fiber will then end up as feces, where it gets passed around the colon and will eventually go into the rectum and the anal canal, where we're going to go and remove that when we go to the toilet. So what do the liver and the gallbladder do? So the liver is located to the right of the stomach, and it's just inferior to the diaphragm but superior to the small intestine. So basically what that is saying there is that inferior is below, so it sits just below the diaphragm but just above the small intestine. It weighs approximately 3 pounds and is the second largest organ in the body. But as for its function in the body, the main function of the liver with regards to digestion is to produce bile acid, which we then secrete into the small intestine. If you look over at the gallbladder is a small pear-shaped organ which is located just posterior to the liver, so it means just behind. This is used to store and recycle any excess bile acid that is not used up by the small intestine. So if the small intestine has got excess bile acid that we can recycle and use at a later date, it will store it within the gallbladder. The pancreas. The pancreas is a large gland which is located inferior, so again just below, and posterior, so just behind the stomach, and it's approximately 6 inches in length. This secretes the digestive enzymes that we spoke about. So we spoke about amylase, which was the enzyme that breaks down carbohydrates. That is actually secreted by the pancreas. You've also got lipase, which is secreted, and this is the enzyme that breaks down fat. So lipase breaks down your fat, amylase breaks down your carbohydrates. You've then got trypsin and you've got pepsin as well. Both of those are responsible for breaking down proteins into amino acids. And then we've just briefly touched on the fiber. So fiber is needed to ensure efficient gut function and is there to basically ensure effective digestion and absorption of other nutrients. So it's key that dietary fiber is in our diets when we're consuming food, and we want to try and make sure we're consuming around 30 odd grams per day. But that is going to vary dependent on if you've got specific goals and how much food you actually consume on a daily basis. So it's important to recommend your clients to research, or you can guide them to the right place to find out how much fiber they need to be consuming daily. But one thing to note, fiber is very good at helping to slow the release of glucose in the bloodstream. So if you've got a client who loves sugar and they're finding it really difficult to remove it from their diet, try to encourage them to consume a bit more fiber. One of the easiest ones is ground up flaxseed powder. You can add it into yogurts, you can add it into a curry, you can add it into most foods on top of your porridge, whatever you kind of wish to do. And all it's going to do is help to slow the release of those sugars down, so it's not such a hit to the bloodstream, causing massive spikes in blood sugar. And to summarize, here is just a quick kind of summary of all of the enzymes and acids that are involved within the digestive system. So I would say maybe do a screen grab of this, pause it, just make sure you've made a note of these, as these do tend to come up as questions in your exam.